I spent 200 days in Terraria's Calamity Mod, and here's what happened.
What? Bro, he snatched my soul!
They jumping me! They jumping me!
There's two of them? Why is there two of them? There's two of them! There's two! Bro, he straight up evaporated me.
Calamity is one of the most, if not the most popular Terraria mod. Calamity adds hundreds of new items, weapons, and so many bosses. It also adds new modes such as Revengeance, Death, and Malice. In this playthrough, I chose Revengeance. My goal in this video is to beat all of the bosses that Calamity adds. This is actually the second part to my Calamity playthrough. You don't have to watch the first one, but you should because it helps my channel out. Last video, I beat all of the bosses up to the Ravager, and I only have 4 hard mode bosses left. So that's where we'll begin. This video is really long, so grab a snack and a drink and let's get started. I started off by continuing where I left off last video by farming the Ravager so I can get the Vesuvius. I beat it 18 times last video and I didn't get it because the drop rate is very low. Kind of like your chances at finding a girlfriend. However, I actually got it on my second attempt, so maybe you have some hope. The Vesuvius is an interesting weapon because when you right click it summons meteors from the sky, and when you left click it shoots them from the wand. Now it was time to start preparing to fight Duke Fishron. I tried moving the truffle in to see if he might sell the truffle worm because you never know in Calamity, but he didn't. So before I went to the mushroom biome to look for it, I went to the helled biome to have the wizard move in because one of you guys told me in the comments that the wizard sells the rod of discord in the helled biome. Then while I waited for the wizard to move in, on day 102 I went to look for the truffle worm. I crafted this item called the Zerg potion, which increases mob spawn rates by a lot. You'll see just how crazy it is in a minute. In the mushroom biome I started making spaces for the worm to spawn, and I took the Zerg potion, and after not too long I found a couple of them pretty easily. Then I grabbed my fishing rod and I bought a rod of discord from the wizard. Then on day 103 I went to the ocean to fight Duke Fishron. I used the truffle worm and spawned the Duke, you know, pretty normal stuff. The fight was going pretty well, not too different from vanilla, until I saw 2 of them. And I thought it was maybe like a new Revengeance thing, but then I got it down to half health and I noticed that something was wrong because their health seemed pretty identical. And then I realized what had happened. So you see, I made a mistake. I used a fishing rod called the Rift Reeler, which is made by using scoria bars, which are late hard mode, so you can expect it to be pretty busted. It fires 3 to 5 lines at once when fishing for more loot and faster fish times. Me using it to spawn the Duke actually spawned 2 of them, so you know, I'm kind of proud for getting so far. So next try I actually grabbed a normal fishing rod and I tried another attempt at the boss. I beat it pretty easily, so now we can check the Duke off the list. Just like last video, I'll put up the lore items, and if you want to pause and read it, you can. Then on day 104 to 105, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I started making preparations to fight the Empress of Light. You can buy prismatic lace wings, which are used to spawn the Empress, from the Drunken Princess in Calamity, so that made it a lot easier. Anyways, while I waited for nighttime, I farmed a bunch of astral enemies to get Titan Hearts to spawn a boss called Astrum Deus. And I also tried an attempt at the Lunatic Cultist, which I was expecting to lose, and I did. I then tried 5 attempts at the Empress, and on my 5th attempt, here's what happened. Since at the time of recording, Calamity got recently ported over to 1.4, balance changes aren't perfect, and bosses such as the Empress and Queen Slime aren't as worked on yet, which is why the boss was pretty much the same, and it also didn't drop a lore item. And then for the rest of day 105 and most of day 106, I suffered against the Lunatic Cultist a lot. I don't know what type of actual crack they gave this dude, but he was on demon time the entire fight. I mean, just watch. Maybe I'm just bad. I don't know. Let me know in the comments because I've never struggled with this boss. After I beat the cultist, the celestial pillar spawned, and for the next 3 days I started working on that. I started off with the nebula pillar first. I used the nebula fragments to craft 2 weapons called Arc Amaryllis and the Cosmic Rainbow. The Arc Amaryllis fired petals that split into homing petals when it hit a block or just after like a couple of seconds. The Cosmic Rainbow is just an upgraded version of the rainbow gun. Not much to say there. Then I took care of the nebula pillar and I headed to the vortex pillar. And after taking that down, I used the fragments to craft the nanopurge and the swarmer, which is pretty much a combined version of the beekeeper and the wasp gun, and I could already tell that this was going to be my favorite. Then finally, I took out the stardust pillar, and before I went to the solar pillar, I decided to fight Astrum Deus. After I died a couple of times, I decided to go at it another way. Since none of my weapons had piercing, I wanted to craft a piercing weapon, and I saw this one called the laser, which said it exploded on enemy hits, which I thought would do really good against it. After I had all the materials, I crafted the laser and it did in fact have piercing effects. Then once it was nighttime, on day 108, I once again spawned Astrum Deus, and this happened. Yeah, so the laser might just be a tad bit broken. Compared to another astral boss that I won't mention, this one is actually really cool and I honestly really enjoyed it. Now that we've beaten Astrum Deus, this means that we can now mine the astral ore in the astral biome. So I did just that, and I got a lot of astral ore. Then once I had enough astral bars, I crafted the astral armor set, and I also crafted the ethereal core, which upgraded my mana even more. And I truly felt like a Chad at this point. The next upgrade I needed to complete my armor set was Hadarian wings, but the twist here is that you can't craft them. They're dropped by an enemy called the Hadarian, which only spawns in the astral desert and has very low spawn rates. So in order to get it to spawn, I turned my desert into an astral biome, and I pretty much spent all of day 109 waiting for one to spawn, but I didn't find a single one. The Hadarian turned out to be even harder to find than KSI's hairline. Then when it was nighttime, I fought Astrum Deus again so I could get the Starfall magic weapon. The Starfall causes stars to fall from the cursor. After that, I actually found a Hadarian, but it didn't drop anything. On day 110, I made my way to the Abyss so I could see what's in the chest at the end of it, because last time I couldn't open it and I kept dying. But in the Abyss, I used my Rod of Discord and I almost had a heart attack. Yeah, so apparently using the Rod of Discord in the Abyss causes a super boss to spawn. When I finally reached the chest, inside it, I found this item called the Terminus, which said that it started the boss rush. I looked it up, and Terminus is supposed to be used after beating the final boss of Calamity, and it spawns buffed versions of all of the bosses to actually make it a challenge. After that, I tried one more attempt looking for Hadarian wings, and I finally got the wings. Afterwards, I took out the solar pillar, and it was finally time to fight Moonlord. And I died. But not to worry, because I crafted the Celestial Sigil, and on day 111 I fought it again. And I lost again. Then I tried my third attempt, and based on the fact that this attempt has more screen time than my last attempts, you can probably tell what happened. Yeah, so I beat it. Who would have thunk? Now with that, we're no longer in hard mode and finally onto the final stage, Host Moonlord. At the end of my last video, I said that post Moonlord is where the real pain started, and I was not lying. I kid you not, I died hundreds, maybe even 1,000 times. Okay, probably not 1,000. But before that, I spun a wheel to find out what class I was going to go with for the final stage of Calamity, and this time I got ranged. So this meant that it was time to start the upgrade segment, and I know how boring it is, so I'll try to speed through it as fast as I can. Moonlord dropped me the STMG, so that meant I at least had a good ranged weapon to get me started. And it also dropped a thing called the Celestial Onion, which gave me another accessory slot. After I beat the Moonlord, I got a bunch of messages. The Profane Flame blazes fiercely. This means that a bunch of new Profane themed enemies have been added, and they will be really important in just a second. Cosmic Terrors are watching. This just means new bosses. Shrieks are echoing from the dungeon means that the dungeon enemies are buff and new enemies called the Phantom Spirits start spawning. And the last one, a cold and dark energy has materialized in space. I don't need to explain this for now. So from day 111 to day 115, I started my upgrades. First thing I did after that was go to the arms dealer so that, you know, I can actually use my gun. Then I went into space to see what the last message meant, and right above my base I found this thing. I tried mining it but I couldn't, so I crafted a solar flare pickaxe and I went back. Turns out it was made of a material called Exodium Cluster, and the inside of the cluster thingy was full of luminite ore. That honestly lasted me pretty much all of this playthrough. I then crafted some vortex armor, and I don't remember why, but I headed to hell, and there I found the new profaned enemies, and they dropped a material called Unholy Essence, which is used to craft a lot of things, including the spawner for our next boss. After that, I got the materials to craft an item called the Normality Reactor, which will be crucial for this playthrough because it is a direct upgrade to the Rod of Discord. You can bind a key on your keyboard, and as long as the reactor is in your inventory and you don't have the Chaos State debuff, you can press that key and teleport without needing to switch weapons or anything. And I crafted this accessory called the Deadshot Brooch, which increases my range damage and gives me a couple more buffs. Then I bought some cogs from the Steampunker and I crafted this bow called the Clockwork Bow. This bow is really unique because it charges up arrows, and the more arrows you have, the more damage it does. Did I also mention that the arrows home in on enemies? Honestly, I did not like this bow at all when I first crafted it, but as I used it more and more, it definitely became my favorite. Then from here on out, things became very confusing since I started working on crafting multiple items at once, and the items to craft those items as well. Then I went to the desert and I spent a long time trying to find desert spirits so I can get the spirit flame which I needed to craft the astral defeat, and little did I know that they actually only spawned in the Crimson Desert. After that, I wanted this accessory called the Recon Scope, which is made by combining the Sniper Scope with the Putrid Scent, which is dropped by Corrupted Mimics. Now let me repeat that. The Putrid Scent is dropped by Corrupted Mimics. I don't know why my peanut brain thought that Crimson Mimics would drop them, so I spent a lot of time farming them and farming Souls of Night so I could craft the Keys of Night. And in order to actually make a farm, I decided to craft a Drill Containment Unit, so that was even more time wasted. Once I had enough Souls of Night, I farmed even more Mimics, and for some reason I didn't get the Putrid Scent, so I gave up on it. After that, I tried looking for more genies, and you can probably expect what happened. Then once my monkey brain figured out that they spawned in the Crimson Desert, I bought some red solution from the Steampunker and turned my desert into a Crimson Desert, and that combined with the Zerg potion allowed me to find a spirit flame after not too long. Then I finally crafted the Astral Defeat, and I didn't like it at all. Even though the damage was good, the arrows just kind of went wherever, and it was hard to hit enemies with it. So honestly, I felt really terrible since I just wasted a lot of time. Okay, so that was a lot of information to take in, so relax for 10 seconds and vibe out with Kirby. Okay, now back to the video. Anyways, at this point I decided I was prepared enough to try and attempt at the next boss called the Profaned Guardians. So I went to hell again and I started farming the enemies so I could get enough Unholy Essence to craft the Profaned Shard. Once I crafted the Profaned Shard, I headed to the Hello to fight the Guardians, and here's how that attempt went. I barely did any damage. So for the rest of day 115, I made my arena a bit bigger since they enraged when they left the Hellowed biome. Then day 116 to 119 were spent on fighting the Profaned Guardians. After I died again, I wanted to craft this weapon called the Prideful Hunter's Planar Ripper, and in the crafting tree it required a weapon called the Cursed Capper, which was made by combining a Phoenix Blaster with Cursed Flames. But here's the problem. My world is a crimson world. Apparently in any worlds, there's a sky island of the world's opposite evil biome, so I went looking for mine. And once I found it, I mined it and I started spreading it underground so I could get the cursed flame. And after a while, I found the Hive Cyst and it spawned the Hive Mind, the corruption variant of the Perforators. And once I beat it, I got the cursed flames. And I went back home and I crafted the cursed Capper. And after some more crafting, I finally crafted the Prideful Hunter's Planar Ripper. Anyways, this weapon is cool because it's cool. Then I died to the Guardians again, and this is when I realized that you can only damage the Guardians by hitting the purple one. So I crafted some Luminite bullets and this weapon called the Planetary Annihilation, and on day 119 I tried another attempt at the
Profane Guardians.
And I beat the Guardians after not too much trouble. Pretty normal, right? Wrong. I died so many times I just had to cut it out. And if you think these deaths are bad, you have no idea how bad it gets. I mean, I guess you have some idea because of the intro. But anyways, the Guardians didn't drop anything important other than the Profane Core, which is a spawning item for one of the next bosses called Providence. But before that, we still had another boss left called the Dragon Folly. And I crafted the exotic pheromones, and my first attempt didn't go too well. But here's how the second one went. Yeah, I beat it fairly easily, which is really surprising because I wanted a ranged weapon that it dropped and I tried fighting it again and I ended up dying 4 times. But hey, I got the Golden Eagle, but it really wasn't that good. Anyways, I then tried a couple of attempts on Providence, nothing too bad. After like 20 deaths, I thought about skipping Providence for now, so I crafted this item called the Rune of Cause, which spawns the Sentinels of the Devourer when used in certain biomes. For example, I used it in space and it spawned the next boss called the Storm Weaver, and I tried some attempts at it. The first attempt I found out that I did pretty much no damage to it. Then the next attempt I realized that its weak point was its tail, but I still died. Then on my third attempt I got it down to like 90% and it broke its shell and became even harder. Ironic. Then since I kept dying, I gave up on it and I went back to Providence. And then on day 123, I beat Providence. But I forgot to record it. So since I didn't want people to think I cheated, I put all the items I got from it away and I kept trying because if I beat it once, then I can surely beat it again, right? And yeah, on day 124, I fought Providence, the profaned goddess, for the last time. For now, at least. This was an experience. As much as I want to hate this boss, I just can't for some reason. Even though I struggled with it so much, I still enjoyed it a lot. Some parts were iffy, for example the little feces it leaves on the ground when it flies around. But other than that, definitely one of my favorites yet. Beating Providence caused a lot of things to happen. A new ore started spawning called Eulibloom, some enemies start dropping a material called Bloodstone, and 3 of the old Hardmode bosses got buffed. The Calamitous Clone, the Brimstone Elemental, and finally the Ravager. Emphasis on the Ravager and you'll see why. Providence also dropped a new material called Divine Geode, which is extremely important. Then from day 125 to day 130 I started working on upgrades. I first started by looking for Eulibloom. When I entered the jungle to look for it, I found a slime and once I killed it, I got some Eulibloom. This will be important later on. But then after a whole day and a half of mining, I only found 2 veins. Then using the small amount of Eulibloom I found, I crafted the heavy laser rifle. And I thought it would be kind of like the Gatling laser, but it was the exact opposite. It fired a laser that was really slow, didn't pierce, and the damage was kind of low. And I also crafted the Angelic Shotgun, and that was kind of cool. I tried being the Ravager again, and so I went to the Brimstone Crag to fight the Brimstone Elemental, and it was severely buffed. But once I beat it, I got the Bloodstone and I went to the dungeon to farm those Phantom Spirits I mentioned earlier, because they dropped a new material called Phantoplasm. And once I had enough Phantoplasm, I combined it with a Bloodstone to make Blood Cores. And I made a very perceptive decision to craft a Blood Boiler. And this weapon is the only reason I stayed sane during this playthrough. It's a flamethrower that doesn't need ammunition. Rather, it drains your health, but you also get health back once you hit enemies. So it balanced it out really good. However, even with this, I still couldn't quite beat the Ravager, so I went to the jungle to look for more Eulibloom. But when I was down there, I had an idea. I crafted a Zerg potion and I headed back. You see, I decided to farm the slimes and get Eulibloom this way. And it worked. I got a whole lot of Eulibloom this way. I didn't have enough material to craft a full armor set, so I beat Providence again. And I crafted the full Tarragon armor set. The set bonus was also cool because the projectiles you shoot heal you, so it worked great with the Blood Boiler, and after some attempts I finally beat the crunchy piece of dookie. And it didn't drop anything special. So that was a huge waste of time. And then after some attempts at the Stormweaver, I wanted to increase my damage a bit and I saw these bullets called the mortar rounds. And they looked good, but I must be blind as a bat because I didn't read the whole thing. And when I crafted it, I shot it to see what it did and I did this. Okay, so you're probably thinking, not too bad, right? Well, I'm so used to having my weapon equipped and then I did this.
So that was pretty much 10 minutes wasted.
Are you starting to see a pattern here with me wasting my time? Anyways, after I tried a couple more attempts at the Stormweaver trying to figure out its patterns, Finally, on day 131, this happened. Yeah, I finally beat the what now? Third Metal Worm. It did drop some interesting items though. Firstly, this bow called the Storm, and it's pretty much the Daedalus Storm Bow on steroids. It also dropped a material called the Armored Shell, which is one of the items dropped by each of the Sentinels. And all three of those items are used to craft the Cosmic Worm, the spawner for the DOG. But it could also be used to craft this gun called the Sea Dragon, which is actually an upgrade to the Mega Shark, which is one of my favorite vanilla weapons. I then worked on that for the next couple of days. The Sea Dragon required some items from the Abyss, and after dying to the adult Eidolon Worm, I cleared out the floor so I could farm the enemies, and I also beat all of the mini bosses, and none of them dropped anything special. But it's for a reason that will make sense in a couple of minutes. Then once I finally had all the materials, I crafted the Sea Dragon and it functioned pretty much like the Mega Shark, except it fired some water every other shot. After that, I went to Hell to fight the next Sentinel called Cygnus, Envoy of the Devourer. But after dying to it twice, I knew that I would need a bigger arena since mine was pretty constricted. So I tried farming Anahita and Leviathan because they dropped a sponge which I thought I could use to soak up the lava in Hell, but for the next 2 days, I was only able to find the question mark thing 3 times. However, on my third attempt, I did get an infinite bucket, so I decided to just use that. Then in Hell, I cleared out a big chunk of space and I started working on an arena. And then on day 136, here's what happened. And that is 2 of the Sentinels down. Cygnus wasn't too hard, definitely the easiest one yet. After that, I headed to the dungeon to fight the last one. The next 2 days were spent on that. I first cleared out a huge space and made an arena. And while I was building the arena, I did get these 2 messages which really confused me, but keep watching to find out what they mean. Then when I finished my arena, I used the Rune of Chaos and I summoned the last Sentinel called the Ceaseless Void. The Void, kind of like the Stormweaver, cannot be damaged at first, but in order to damage it, you have to take out the orbs that it spawns first. And on my first attempt, I pretty much almost beat it. But I died to its last attack, and this pretty much happened in all of my attempts. I would get it down to its last attack, then die, so it was pretty much just a matter of understanding the pattern. Okay, now that's just not fair. And when I finally understood its pattern on day 138, I beat it. This one actually dropped a lore item, and I have to admit, I truly did invoke its anger. You'll see what I mean soon. But right after that, I killed the Phantom Spirit, and this happened. So this is how I found out about the next boss called the Polterghast. After that, I looked at the Polterghast on the boss checklist and I saw that it spawns after killing 30 phantom spirits, so that's what those ominous messages meant. But it could also be spawned using an item, but I needed spooky wood for that, so that was one of my next goals. But before that, I wanted to craft this weapon called the Molecular Manipulator, but I needed a nullification pistol, which is dropped by the Martian Saucer, so I did the Martian Madness event a couple of times. Until I finally got it. Then I crafted the Molecular Manipulator, and this weapon had such a cool gimmick since it would randomly affect the enemies and it could give them a lot of debuffs or buffs, and it could also change their sizes, but it didn't work on bosses, so honestly I completely forgot about this. Then I planted some pumpkins so I could make the medallion, and after a very productive day, I crafted the medallion and I started the event. Once I had enough spooky wood, I crafted the necroplasmic beacon and I headed to the dungeon. And after like 10 deaths, I decided to make my arena bigger. But once I was almost done, for some reason this happened. So I had to redo everything. Then I did it again. You know, sometimes I really do question how I was able to graduate from school. So I redid my arena for the second time, and after some attempts, I had finally memorized its patterns. Kind of. I mean, I mostly just flew around in circles. And I know you're probably tired of hearing these words, but I'm too unoriginal to come up with anything else. But anyways, on day 142, here's what happened. Polterghast also dropped a material called Ruinous Soul, which can be used to craft a whole bunch of new weapons and new armor sets. I first wanted to craft a Blood Flare armor set, so I went and fought the Brimstone Elemental a couple of times. Then once I had enough Bloodstone, I crafted the Blood Flare armor set, and it was really good. It caused my weapons to fire an explosion every couple of seconds, and it also had a cool set bonus. It released souls, which homed in on enemies. Another thing Polterghast dropped was this accessory called the Affliction, which is a better version of the community. After I beat Polterghast, I did get a message. The Abyssal Spirits have been disturbed. This means that the enemies in the Abyss and the Sulphurous Sea now drop new items, and the Acid Rain is in its third and final tier now. So I headed to the Abyss to beat all of the mini-bosses to see what they dropped. The Eidolon Worm dropped some weapons, but they weren't Ranger, so I couldn't use them. The Colossal Squid dropped a really good summon, and the Reaper Shark dropped some cool items too. But more importantly, it dropped the Reaper Tooth, which is used in a lot of recipes and will play a big part later on. Then I crafted this flamethrower called the Haley's Inferno, and it was kind of more like a sniper, but it pierced enemies and used gel, so I guess it's a flamethrower. I then used a Caustic tier to start the Acid Rain event so I could fight the next tier, and the event was really hard. But it's not hard as in tough, it's just full of garbage projectiles that clutter up the screen and confuse you. I also found a new mini-boss called the Nuclear Terror, and it was cool until I had to beat it for the 10th time. It spawns way too frequently and gets annoying way too quickly. Then once I got the event completion down to 99%, I had this tornado spawn, and out of the tornado came the next boss, the Old Duke, and I seriously hate this boss. Like, there's nothing about this boss I like. First of all, why does the fish have a beard in the first place? Second, I don't know why, but this fish just rubs me the wrong way. Like, it's giving racist. I'll elaborate further when the death montage starts. Before I tried another attempt at the racist, I needed to make some upgrades since I was obviously not ready. I first wanted this shield called the Aegis, which is dropped by Providence, so I started farming Providence. In the middle of that, I also crafted this weapon called the Maelstrom, which was an upgrade to the Storm. So I thought it was safe to assume that it would function kind of like the Storm. Nope. It fired a Reaper Shark as an arrow, and that's kind of cool, but that's pretty much all it did, so it was really disappointing. After that, I went to the Abyss to get some more Reaper teeth, and after I got those, I crafted yet another bow called the Monsoon, which was way better than the Maelstrom. The fire rate was good, and the tornadoes it left behind did some good damage. After that, I went and beat Providence a lot of times, and I didn't get the Aegis, and then I looked it up, and it apparently only drops it in Hell, so I'm really taking L's after L's this video. Then when I beat Providence in Hell, I got the Aegis, and after that, I went looking for Bloodworms, which are pretty much the Truffle Worm for the racist, and once I took a Zerg potion, I was able to find a lot of them. Now, time for the quick death montage. The reason I hate this boss so much is because of how it predicts my movement so well, and its dashes are so annoying. It lines itself up with my movements and then tilts a bit further, so it always hits me. And my 4 brain cells can never figure out how I should move, so I kept dying to it. And then finally, on day 147, I got really lucky. I said I got lucky because after this, I was not able to beat the Old Duke again. Now this is a point in my playthrough where I slowly started to lose my sanity. The next 20 days were pure pain. Anyways, the Old Duke did drop this gun called the Fetid Emesis. There wasn't anything too special about it, it just did good damage. But the Duke could also drop another weapon called the Septic Skewer and an accessory called the Old Duke Scales, which I really wanted. I tried beating it again, and like I said, I couldn't beat it. Then I gave up on it for now, and I crafted the Cosmic Worm, and I spawned the DOG, the Devourer of... Yeah, so after a couple of deaths, I realized that my damage was really low, so I had an idea in order to upgrade my damage. I went to the mini corruption biome I created earlier, and I took a Zerg potion, and I was actually able to get corruption mimics to spawn. And after a while, one of them dropped the putrid scent, so I was able to finally craft the recon scope. I also then worked on getting this accessory called the Reaper Tooth Necklace, which as you can guess was made up of the Reaper teeth. So I beat some more sharks, and I also fought the Great Sand Shark mini boss so I could get the Grand Scale. Then I crafted the Reaper Tooth Necklace, and I tried more attempts. And then on one attempt, I was able to take off almost half health, and the new face was not what I was expecting. In its first phase, I was having a lot of trouble dodging its headfirst attacks since I couldn't zoom out any further. When it dashed at me, I had very little time to react, and when it did hit me, I was pretty much dead. If you remember from earlier, when I beat Polterghast, I said that I could craft multiple armor sets, and I chose the Blood Flare armor set. Well, the other one was the Omega Blue set, which I didn't choose because it said that it disabled regeneration, but in turn the damage output was seriously good. So I chose to craft it just to see what it did. But it required a lot of Reaper Teeth to craft, and it took me about half an hour of straight farming to get enough. and on day 154 I crafted the full set, and even though it disables regeneration, you can still heal because of the tentacles it spawns. Every time the tentacles make contact with an enemy, they heal the player, and it's even better with the set bonus. You see, when I pressed C, I activated my set bonus called the Abyssal Madness for 5 seconds. My damage increased by 10%, and the tentacles became a lot more aggressive. So that in turn made healing easier too. Then I had an idea. I could now activate 4 buffs at the same time: Adrenaline, Rage, Elysian Guard from the Aegis, and the Abyssal Madness. So my strategy from now on was to combine all of them at the same time. And I'd say it was a success since I was able to deal damage upwards of like 50 or 60k pretty easily. Then after a while of dying to both the dog and the racist, yes, I'm gonna call it the dog because it's easier to say. I was getting ready to fight the dog again, and this happened. And then at this point, I had an epiphany. I put dummies all around my arena hoping that it would heal me mid-fight, but the Calamity devs took that into consideration. It also didn't work with super dummies. Then after dying like once more, I had another insight. What about statues? With that question in mind, I put down a statue and it worked. To an extent. I then went to the Calamity Discord to ask for help to see if I was maybe missing something, and I was told to try the Sulfuric Acid Cannon and the Blood Boiler. I already had the Blood Boiler, but in order to get the Acid Cannon, I had to beat a mini-boss called the Mauler, which spawns in the Acid Rain, but it spawned so rarely for me that I had to do the event 3 times before I was finally able to get the cannon. The acid cannon was seriously good because not only does it home, but it also sticks on enemies and constantly deals damage. After that, I added some more statues, and from this point on, there's no more upgrades I could really do. So it was just a matter of time, a really long time.
What? Bro, he snatched my soul!
Bro, please, bro! Why are you doing?
I can't take this anymore. How the hell was I supposed to dodge that?
I did get some attempts where I got close, but I was having so much trouble with this boss. I was having a lot of problems, from getting stuck on the world ceiling to not being able to see the flames it shoots because of the background, but by far the hardest part was dealing with the laser attack during its second phase, because 99% of the time, no matter what I did, I was always a bit off from the safe spot. Like in this clip, the laser just suddenly came at me from the top, like how was I supposed to know that was gonna change directions? And then finally, on day 168, this happened. Normally, when I beat a boss, I feel a sort of satisfaction as if I deserved it. But I didn't feel it when I fought this boss at all. I felt that I just had the right amount of luck in order to dodge all of the garbage it threw at me. The picture I just showed you might look confusing to you if you're not an editor, but all of those little squares you see are all clips. And all of those are deaths. And these aren't even all of the deaths. I counted my deaths and I died 194 times, give or take. But still, I don't hate this boss. I feel like they just need to rework this boss a bit and it'll be perfect. But I know that the Calamity devs are planning a whole rework for this boss, so hopefully they make this fight more fair. Now we're on the final stretch and only have 3 bosses left. I spent the rest of day 168 all the way to day 174 on upgrades. Anyways, in terms of drops, the dog did drop a material called Cosmolite bars, which are used to craft an overwhelming amount of items. It also dropped a sword called Excelsis, which seriously made me consider switching classes. When I beat the dog, I did get some messages, and even my peanut brain can figure out what these meant. I assumed that they had something to do with the solar eclipse, the pumpkin moon, and the frost moon event. So I used a solar tablet to start the eclipse, and I was right. The enemies in the eclipse dropped a new material called Dark Sun Fragments. Then once the eclipse was over, I looked at the crafting recipes using the fragments, and I saw this one called the Ascendant Spirit Essence, which was made by Dark Sun Fragments, Nightmare Fuel, Endothermic Energy, and Phantoplasm. After that, using the Cosmolite bars, I crafted the Cosmic Anvil, which can be used to craft a bunch of new items. Then using the Dark Sun Fragments and Cosmolite bars, I crafted my first weapon called the Starmata, which as you can guess had something to do with stars. It used fallen stars as ammo, but I only had like 200 on me at that point, so that made it pretty useless for me. I then crafted this flamethrower called the Cleansing Blaze because I needed to fight the dog again, so I assumed it would do good against it. And after some deaths, I was able to fill my adrenaline up and I absolutely shredded the dog. Also, it then dropped this pet called the Cosmic Raptor and it scared the shit out of me. Then for the rest of day 170, I did the Pumpkin Moon event so I could get the Nightmare Fuel. Anyways, right after I finished the Pumpkin Moon, I had the solar eclipse happen again, so while I waited for night, I farmed the enemies. Then using the Nightmare Fuel, I crafted another weapon called the Karasava, which looked absolutely insane, but it wasn't the best, so it quickly fell into obscurity. Then when it was night, I did the Frost Moon event so I could get the Endothermic Energy. Since I had all of the materials now, I could craft the Ascendant Spirit Essence. Using my Spirit Essence, I first crafted some Elysian Tracers, which are my boots combined with my Elysian wings, so they fit into one accessory slot. I also crafted the Asgardian Aegis, which is the combination of the Elysian Aegis and the Asgardian Valor. After some attempts, I finally beat the dog again, so this meant that I had enough Cosmolite now to craft the next armor set, the God Slayer set. Now with this, I could finally take off my Omega Blue set, which was full of blood, sweat, and tears. Mostly tears. The Godslayer set bonus gave me a dash, which honestly never worked. I had to like spam C for it to ever work, and usually it just threw me in a random direction. Afterwards, I crafted the Alluvion, which is the upgrade to the Monsoon, and the SDFMG, the upgrade to the SDMG, and the Fetid Amisis. The Alluvion was cool, but it was just like the Monsoon. But the SDFMG was just satisfying, like listen to this. Just using this weapon calmed me down so much, I don't know how to explain it. Next I made these bullets called the Godslayer slugs and these arrows called the Vanquisher arrows. The Godslayer slugs did this, I don't know how to explain it, it's pretty straightforward. And the Vanquisher arrows homed in on enemies. Then finally I crafted the last weapon called the Ultima, which was the ranger equivalent of the last prism since it did more damage the longer you held it until it hit a cap. Then on day 174 I crafted the Jungle Dragon Egg, the spawner for the next boss, and the next 4 days were spent on that. When I used the egg in the jungle, I spawned the next boss called the Jungle Dragon Yaron. Its description said that it enraged when it left the fire beams it spawns, and on my first attempt I did this. And it evaporated me. Then I tried doing the same thing I did with the Plaguebringer and I tried spawning it on the Planetoid so I could fight it on my arena. But since it spawned all the way up there, it was constantly enraging. After that, I wanted to make sure that I was at my peak, so I watched this video by Get Good Whoa, and I crafted an accessory called the Elemental Quiver, which gave me a good increase in damage. Then on day 175, I made a big arena in the jungle to fight Yaron on. At this point, I had all of my weapons maxed out and all of my upgrades done, so from here on out, it was just a matter of time. With each attempt, I could tell that I was getting better, however, I was having a lot of trouble with the projectiles and Yaron's dashing, since I couldn't really see the projectiles it was spawning or Yaron's face changing until it was already headed towards me. The only way I was able to tell was from listening to audio cues, but that was kind of tough. But then, on day 178, I remembered something. When I was looking at mods for future videos, I found this one called the Better Zoom, which allowed you to zoom in really close, but it also allowed you to zoom in really far, or zoom out really far. So I tried that, and it zoomed out so far that the blocks didn't load. So once I figured out a good amount, I started more attempts, and it took a while for me to get used to it, but I was surely doing better. Then, on day 179, I did it. I zoomed out even further, and right after that, I died. And then I died again. But then, I died again. However, after that, on day 179, I didn't die. This fight was so fun, and the music caught me so off guard when I first heard it, but still, it was just definitely one of my favorites yet. The lore item is also pretty sad, but also kind of confusing. My total death count to this boss was 45, which is still a lot, but compared to the dog, it didn't feel like a lot. Now, we only have 2 bosses left. Anyways, in terms of drops, Yaron didn't drop me any ranged weapons yet, but it did drop a material called Yaron Soul Fragments, which can be combined with Auric Ore, a new ore that started spawning after I beat Yaron, to create Auric bars. So I went looking for them, and for some reason they only spawn near Hell, but I was able to find a lot of them. Then once I had enough, I went home and I crafted the Auric bar, and using the Auric bars, I crafted the Auric Tesla armor set, which was interesting because it required my previous armors, the Bloodflare, Terragon, and Godslayer sets to craft, and that makes sense because its set bonus was the set bonus of all of them combined. But one critique I have that might not seem important, but it matters to me a lot: why is the Ranger helmet so ugly? especially when compared to the rest. It's just not fair. Anyways, then I combined my Elysian Tracers with the Drew Wings that Yaron dropped to craft the Celestial Tracers, the final upgrade to my shoes. I also crafted a bow called the Dretelliornis, which was amazing. However, it had a big flaw. The Dretelliornis was kind of like the Ultima, where it would start off slow but slowly start shooting faster and does more damage. However, with this one, once you got hit, not only did it reset the whole thing, but it also reduced your flight time, so that made it less than ideal, especially when used against the next bosses. I then crafted a gun called the Minigun, which was just a fast gun, and I also crafted the Dragon Fruit, the last upgrade to my health. Then I fought Yaron again to get a gun that it dropped, and I honestly kind of felt bad since I demolished the poor dude. And after I beat it again, I got the Dragon's Breath, which I didn't realize at first, but it was insane. When you left clicked, it fired bullets which exploded on impact, but when you right clicked, it fired both those bullets and the ones you have equipped. But since the damage on the Super Dummy was lower than the minigun, I didn't pay too much attention to it. Now I believed that I was prepared to try an attempt at the next boss called the Exomex, but on the checklist, this is all it said. After definitely no help from the internet, I realized I had to decrypt more schematics. I crafted the voltage regulation system and decrypted the schematic from hell, and Radon would be the type of dude to say addendum. Then I crafted the Auric Quantum Cooling Cell and I placed it on the codebreaker and nothing happened. But once I right clicked on it, I saw this button called Contact, and when I clicked it, this happened. I was given a choice to choose between 3 buttons: Thanatos, Ares, and Artemis and Apollo. I chose Thanatos because it sounded like Thanos, so I was curious, and that's one way to make an entrance. Next attempt I chose Ares and this big dude came out of the top. Then when I got it down to like 30%, it disappeared and the other 2 mechs came out. Then when I chose Artemis and Apollo, these 2 twins ripoffs came out. And then at this point I realized what was happening. This was just straight on jumping me, and I could already tell that this was going to be another death montage like the dog. But unlike the dog, I wasn't getting as frustrated since the mechs didn't feel like luck, but rather an actual test of your skill. It could also be the lack of cringy one-liners. Anyways, I then spent the next 10 days on this boss. I was also slowly starting to come up with a nice strategy by this point. I would always choose Thanatos to begin with since dodging its attacks wasn't a problem. Then I would charge up my adrenaline, and once I started the next phase, I used the Dragon's Breath and combined it with adrenaline to completely and utterly destroy Ares. And after some attempts, I was able to take out Artemis and Apollo and go on to the last phase. But this happened. However, on the attempts that didn't happen, I would always die to this one laser attack that I just couldn't figure out how to dodge. Then after a bunch of attempts, on day 186, I thought about trying an attempt at Supreme Calamitous. So I crafted the Altar of the Cursed and I used the Ashes of Calamity on it, which spawned Supreme Calamitous. And this boss literally starts off with a bullet hell phase. That was even harder because the projectiles blended in with the background, so it was so hard to tell the difference. And after that was over, it spawned this creepy ass lizard thingy that took no damage. But before I died, I did see these hearts that I could damage. Then after like 10 deaths, I was able to take out all of the hearts and I died right after. But before I died, I was able to hit her with a bullet, so that counts for something. The lowest I was able to get her down in all of my attempts right now was half health. But I did craft this weapon called the Tyranny's End, which was a sniper, and with this I was able to one-shot the hearts. However, it was really hard to aim with it. Then after a total of 35 attempts, I ran out of ashes, so I gave up on her. On the Exomex side, I was almost consistently able to get down to the last mech, but I couldn't figure out how to dodge that laser attack. Then after 5 days of straight deaths, on day 193 I was at the last mech and I died, but my game crashed. And when I reopened it, my character was gone. I couldn't reopen it, so I used another character and I recrafted and recollected everything. So that wasted a lot of time. Also, I forgot to turn off the mod. I didn't cheat, I just forgot about it. Anyways, after that, I died to the damn laser attack again, so I looked up how to dodge it, and literally all you have to do is just wait and move to the side. And right after that, deadass on my next attempt, this happened. And the total death count to this boss is 119. That's a lot, but like I said, compared to the dog, not too much, but still really painful. Anyways, you already know the drill now. The Exomax dropped a new material called Exoprism, which can be used to craft a lot of items, but they also dropped an accessory called Radon's Heart, which converts adrenaline to nanomachines. So this way you don't lose adrenaline when you get hit. However, rather than getting a damage increase, you get 350 health back, which is a pretty good deal, but I like the damage increase, so I didn't equip it yet. I also got this mount called the Exo Box, which was amazing. You can bind keys to either slow down or go faster, and since it had infinite flight, it was amazing. Then I crafted another workstation called the Radon's Forge. Then using the Exoprisms, I crafted another material called the Miracle Matter. Then using that, I crafted a bow called the Heavenly Gale and a flamethrower called the Photo Viscerator or Viscerator. The Heavenly Gale was cool because all of the arrows it fired inflicted different debuffs and it left a tornado behind. However, the Photo Viscerator was amazing. It was a flamethrower that shot homing bolts when it hit enemies, and the damage was also insane. I thought about crafting the Gemtech armor set, so I needed more Exoprisms, but even with my upgraded equipment, I died to the Exomex. So I just decided to give up on that. Then I beat the Calamitous clone so I could get more ashes, and after I had enough, I made my arena a bit bigger so I could have more mobility. And after that, I just started doing more attempts since there weren't really any more upgrades left I could do. I also realized two things. The Exo Chair was amazing during this fight since the bullet hell phase was considerably easier. Same with the photo eviscerator. I was able to shred through the hearts that she spawns easily. Then on one attempt, I got her down really low and she actually spawned her two brothers, Cataclysm and Catastrophe, and that is a big upgrade from the clones. Then after a couple of deaths, I came up with a good strategy. My plan was to survive no matter what until she spawns her brothers, and there I can just take out one of the brothers and just dodge while I completely heal and my potion timer resets. This strategy became even better when I equipped the Draydon's heart accessory, since I could also fill up my adrenaline and have a lot of spare health in its next phase. And using this strategy, I came really close and it was just a matter of time. A really short time, because on day 197, I walked up to the altar for the last time and I put the ashes in. And I spawned the last boss, Supreme Calamitous. My death count to Calamitous is 56. Lower than I thought. Now, even though there's no more bosses left, we still have the boss rush. I wanted to at least attempt it before the 200 days ended. Supreme Calamitous dropped a material called Ashes of Annihilation, which can be combined with Auric Bars and Exoprism to create another material called Shadow Spec Bars, which are used to craft endgame gear. Using the Shadow Spec, I crafted 2 guns called the Sven Technical and the Void Dragon. The Sven Technical caused bullets to separate, which did insane damage, and the Void Dragon did this. I then beat Calamitous again so I could get more ashes. But then I died to the Exomex, which really made me frustrated, not gonna lie. So I decided to use a melee weapon, even though I chose Ranger because honestly, who cares? I beat Yaron again so I could get the Dragon's Rage, and it was pretty good. I was able to completely annihilate Thanatos using this, and because of that, I was able to get a good amount of Exoprisms.
Come on, man! That's too easy!
Then once I had enough Shadow Spec, I crafted the Demon Shade armor set, which wasn't technically Ranger, it was all classes, and it also gave me 10 minion slots. I tried it out on Calamitous and it melted her. I also crafted a bow called the Contagion and this pickaxe called the Crystal Crusher, just because it said it had 1000 pickaxe power and I wanted to see what that meant. Anyways, then finally on day 200, I used a Terminus to start the boss rush, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You just have to fight boss after boss. And it was going pretty good until I got it down to the Dragon Folly and I beat it. Then this happened. I thought it was maybe because of too many items on the ground, so I turned on the cheat sheet because it allows you to clear out all the items on the ground, but even that didn't fix it. So nothing to do now. And that's 200 days in Calamity. I hope you had fun because I sure did, kind of. Some parts of this mod really annoyed me, but overall, this was an amazing experience. I definitely want to revisit this again. I mean, I kind of have to because last video I said that if that video got 100 likes, I would do a death mode plus master mode playthrough. And it's currently at 147 likes, so next video I will be doing that. But before the video ends, this video was seriously hard to make and a like or comment would be really appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.